Welcome back to The Stars Are Hollow. This time, something a little different. Up until now, our stories have wandered through the absurd corners of the cosmos, but this one is quieter, older, and steeped in stillness. The Watcher on the Hill is my first foray into something more solemn. A cosmic story, yes, but one told with patience, silence, and a kind of sorrow that stretches beyond memory. So settle in, let the valley unfold, and listen for what watches back. The Watcher on the Hill by James A. Andrews. The hill overlooked a valley bathed in sunlight, where a patchwork of fields quilted the earth, stitched together by hedgerows and dotted with grazing sheep. Their soft bleating drifted upwards, carried by the cool, unhurried breeze. Beyond the fields, a small village clustered around a weathered church spire, its stone walls warmed by the golden light of the late afternoon sun. The Watcher had stood there for longer than memory allowed. Long before the sheep, before the hedgerows, before the village, or even the idea of humankind. Its form, once sharp and imposing, had weathered, now irregular with age and the action of the elements. To any passing eye, it was nothing more than an old, craggy boulder, half buried in the hillside, lichen mottling its surface like scars, whilst insects crept over it regardless of its nature. But within the cold stone, something immeasurable, something ancient and sentient, was bound by a fear it could no longer name. It had arrived here when the world was young, an incomprehensible age ago. At first it had gazed upon a vast and savage landscape of ice and stone, a land untamed and indifferent to time. The Watcher had known purpose then, though it no longer remembered what that purpose was. It had stood vigilant, its senses sharp, its being pulsing with meaning. It had waited, unmoving, as the world churned and reshaped itself beneath uncountable skies. And then they came. At first they were like shadows, flitting across the land, their minds small and curious. They carried fire, though they feared it as much as they cherished it. They sang to the stars and carved images into the bones of the beasts that surrounded them. The Watcher had observed them with a growing sense of unease. An instinct, deep within its core, whispered, "Do not move. Do not be seen. They're dangerous." The shadows became people. The fire turned into villages, the land softened under their touch, reshaped to suit their needs. For thousands of years the Watcher remained still, unseen in its perch on the hill, watching the valley below. And it was lonely. The Watcher couldn't recall if it had companions once. Perhaps long ago there'd been others like it, standing sentinel across the land. Perhaps they'd whispered to one another through the tremors of the earth, exchanging secrets too profound for the creatures below to grasp. Or perhaps the Watcher had always been alone. He couldn't remember anymore. That memory was gone, eroded by time, like a cliff battered by relentless waves that sink, lost into the sea. The passing millennia had chipped away at more than its memories. The Watcher could feel itself diminishing, its form subtly shifting as rain carved rivulets into its surface and wind smoothed its jagged edges. It was an agonizingly slow unravelling, yet the Watcher felt every grain of itself that was stolen away, every imperceptible fracture that weakened its core. It had long since forgotten the words of its fear, the primal command to stand still and unseen, but the feeling lingered, like a shadow at the edges of its mind. As the people below built their homes and lives, the Watcher's fear evolved into something more gentle, more melancholy. The village grew and the valley transformed. Children chased each other through meadows that had once been glaciers. Smoke curled lazily from chimney pots. The sheep came. Their ceaseless bleating filled the air like a low hymn. The Watcher had even begun to like the sheep. They reminded it of the beasts that had once roamed here, vast and unhurried, unaware of their impending extinction. But the sheep never lingered long near the Watcher, and it hurt to be alone for so long. As the days became years, The years turned into centuries. The Watcher lost more of itself to the elements. Its surface pockmarked and cracked. It no longer remembered its name, or if it had ever had one. It no longer remembered the many valleys it had stood over before this one, though it thought that there must have been others. The Watcher began to forget the people too, their faces blurred in its memory, their lives and laughter reduced to echoes. The once crisp sounds of the valley became a muted hum, indistinct and far away. The Watcher couldn't tell if the world had grown quieter or if it had simply stopped hearing. And yet it still stood, a solitary, lonely figure on the hill. One spring morning the sheep didn't come. The village was silent, its streets empty. The valley felt wrong, though the Watcher couldn't say why. Its fear flickered weakly in its core, but there was nothing left there to anchor it to. The Watcher stood alone, overlooking an emptiness it no longer recognised. It rained that night, acid and hot, and the Watcher felt the rain burrow into its cracks, widening the fractures there, small pieces of itself falling away, lost to the earth below. The pain was distant now, a dull ache that the Watcher barely noticed. By the time sun rose again, it had lost the ability to care. And the centuries marched on, while the Watcher's form grew smaller, worn down by the slow grinding of time. Eventually people returned to the valley, though the Watcher couldn't see them anymore. He could feel them distantly, the vibrations of their footsteps resonating in its diminishing form. One day after a storm, a child from the village wandered up the hill. She stopped near the Watcher, tilting her head as she examined the strange lichen-covered boulder. She reached out to touch it, her fingers brushing against its surface. The Watcher felt the warmth of her hand, and something stirred deep within it, a faint flicker of what it had once been. But the child laughed and ran off, leaving the Watcher behind. And so it remained. Until it didn't. The day came when the last of the fragments of the Watcher crumbled to dust, carried away on the wind. The hill was empty now, its lone sentinel gone. In the valley below, the sheep grazed, the sun shone, the village carried on, oblivious to the loss of the ancient, frightened thing that had watched over them for so long. The Watcher was no more, its memory erased by the very world it had feared. But for a brief, immeasurable moment, as the last of it scattered into the air, the Watcher felt something it hadn't even known that it had longed for. Peace. That was The Watcher on the Hill, a story not of horror, but of time, of fading purpose, quiet endurance, and the strange tenderness of being forgotten. If you felt something stir in the silence between the words, perhaps that's the Watcher still lingering in the dust. I've been James A. Andrews, and this is The Stars Are Hollow. Thank you for listening, and until the next time, please like and subscribe and keep looking, because somewhere, something still remembers.